Welcome to People More Interesting Than Me, the podcast, where I step back and let fascinating individuals take the spotlight. Join me as I sit down with incredible guests who captivate and inspire, showcasing their stories, experiences, and wisdom that make them truly extraordinary. Tune in for engaging conversations that'll leave you enlightened and entertained. At least I'm entertained. This week, we've got globetrotter in the house, Zhang, the Prince of Travel. Since 2014, Ricky's been living the dream, earning and burning millions of points to enjoy the best of airline cabins, luxury hotels, and exclusive lounges. But here's the kicker. He's not keeping it to himself. Ricky's on a mission to inspire you to explore the world. With miles and points, he's proved that the dream destinations are closer than you think. So recline that seat back, listen, and enjoy. This is going to be a difficult question. Where are you right now? Where's your home base?
Yeah, of course. Usually I'm up in the air traveling a fair bit, but right now I'm in Vancouver, Canada, which is my home for the past 3 years or so. And it's actually been a while since I took my last trip, my last major trip. I've been taking it relatively easy for most of the first month of 2024 in January.
Okay. And where are you originally from?
Originally, it's a bit of a story. So I'm actually born in Vancouver, same place I am right now, back in '94. And then our family moved back to Asia. So I grew up in Hong Kong and Beijing and, spent my years until I was 18 in those two cities. And then I came back to Canada for university, lived in Toronto for a handful of years, Canada's biggest city, went to university, started to build my career, and lived in Montreal and London, England for a year each, before moving to Vancouver in 2021.
That's awesome. I've been to Vancouver once, but it was purely for to go to Whistler and Whistler related activities. So you are the Prince of Travel. Let me just ask, did you coin that phrase or was that
I did coin the phrase. So I coined the phrase. I never said I was it, right? I never said never. It was never explicitly on the website that we started. It was never like I am the Prince of Travel. But of course, there is a bit of association that's intended for the audience to kind of pick up on this idea of the Prince of Travel and this potentiality of being able to travel like royalty, travel in style, and at a fraction of the price. That's always kind of what we're always been all about. And so yeah, just the name kind of came to me back in 2017 when I started Prince of Travel. I was trying to start a travel website of some kind, trying to think of a name, and couldn't really think of a good domain name for a while until I was trying various combinations and found Prince of Travel. Okay, kind of rolls off the tongue, kind of interesting, makes people wonder what it means, and went ahead and bought that domain name and started posting content.
No, that's great. And I mean, when I think of that, and obviously we weren't around during this time, you think of the Mattress King and all these hokum type people who say king of mattresses, king of, I don't know, tires, stuff like that. But Prince of Travel just sounds elegant. So what would you say sets you apart from normal travel agents and people nowadays, they go to kayak or Google flight, or it's been a while since I did my trip, but you say set you apart that you were trying to fill?
Yeah, so we're all about helping to educate travelers on the best ways to maximize your points to fly in business class or in first class, or to just take a whole bunch more trips compared to what you're normally able to do without using points, right? That's one of our key areas of concentration, the area that we started off on and started building a level of expertise and sharing with people. I think a lot of people, they understand the idea of using points, the fact that it's something that's possible, but there's not a whole lot of resources out there that goes into the details on how you actually maximize the value, how you actually find the flights that will, help you get the most value out of your hard-earned points, which credit cards you should be using out there in order to earn points. And so back in the day, especially in Canada, there was not a whole lot of resources around this topic. And I was very passionate about figuring all of this out for myself because I wanted to, experience a lot more traveling, seeing the world, some of these luxurious experiences as well. and I didn't want to pay full price for it. I was trying to figure out if there was a better way, and as I did so, I figured out there was actually a huge gap in the market, right? Lots of value to be had by playing your credit card points the right way, but not a lot of people knew what they were doing. Not a lot of people being able to put that into practice, and so that's kind of the story of Prince of Travel, the unique value proposition that we bring, and we've since grown into a much bigger platform on the backs of delivering that value to travelers, delivering that educational piece.
That's great. And obviously, I mean, you kind of said your resume on multitude of places that you've actually stayed, like for long periods of time. I would imagine you've gone through some of the best traveled flights, like obviously first class. But what is one of the worst travel experiences you've ever had?
The worst travel experience. I mean, at some level, I'm the type of traveler who likes to, find a silver lining, find an upside in every kind of travel experience, right? So usually whenever I'm out there in the world, even if it's a negative experience, like I've had taxi drivers, trying to rip me off, Thailand, Russia. I can think of various instances when I've had negative experiences. But to me, I'm not somebody who really thinks about that and lets it register in my mind for too long, because at the end of the day, you still had the opportunity to experience a new place. And so, yeah, I've never really had a travel experience where I've gone there, had the experience, and then thought, oh, I regret everything. Like this wasn't worth it. I've had maybe instances where something has gone not so savorly, or not the ideal, not the best. But then those just end up becoming part of the tapestry of the overall set of travel experiences that I've had over the years. So, I think the fear of a negative travel experience is something that can easily hold people back when it comes to travel. I'd say that even if you embark on a trip and it doesn't actually turn out the way you had dreamed of or idealized, that's still okay, because it's still added, a valuable memory to look back on, even if it's not the first one that would come to mind when you think back to all of your travel experiences.
So one of my other questions that I think a lot of people listening, if they're millennials or our age, we know a lot of people like boomer age who are kind of like they'll never, I mean, they might have been on a plane maybe twice or like three times in their life. How do you, how would you say, or how would you get to those people to kind of get them out of their comfort zone?
Yeah, well, for me, it's a good point you make, because I've been fortunate to be exposed to the wonders of traveling since a young age, right? And so it's been a big motivator for me to start my business as well, in sharing that message and spreading the joy and encouraging people to break their own boundaries and expand their horizons. I think a lot of people don't have that same privilege, right? So when they're growing up, they maybe stay in their small bubbles, stay in their small communities. And to me, it's a matter of starting small, right? Going at your own pace and figuring out what's the best kind of way to dip your toes into the travel world without necessarily going on a big trip at the start. Obviously, if you have those aspirations to go on a big trip and see more of the world, then another factor that stands in people's way is often cost and the intimidation factor. And that's where we try to come in and show people that it doesn't have to break the bank, right? There's lots of ways and tips and strategies to achieve a very exciting trip without having to pay a lot out of pocket. But if you're kind of, yeah, like intimidated by the idea of travel, or if it's not something that you would usually, organically embark on yourself, then I think it's a matter of going for those small wins, right? So maybe it's a road trip, like the province or the state over, or simply a weekend trips within the same country, but allowing you to get that, first few hits of excitement from having new experience, absorbing a new way of life, getting to know people of a different worldview. And then once you've had a few of those wins under your belts, I believe, somebody who's destined to be a traveler after they've had a few of those, then they're ready to embark on the bigger adventures.
No, that's great. Small footsteps is usually the best way to start running and get into bigger stuff. Obviously, your business is defined by the adjective luxury. So what would you determine, there's regular like travel and stuff like that, but what would you define as luxury travel that goes beyond?
Yeah, defining luxury is always an interesting one. It's definitely a term that eludes a very precise definition, and then it really means something different to everybody who's, especially, among people who seek out luxury travel. We started off doing content around traveling the world on points and credit cards, and more recently we also created our own luxury travel agency as part of Prince of Travel. It's called Prince Collection. So we launched this relatively recently, and so we've been in the space as well, looking to deliver some of these higher end travel experiences to some of our luxury clients, whilst also enabling your average traveler to have a taste of luxury through some of the content we do around credit cards and points. And when it comes to luxury myself, obviously there's the creature comforts, right? Obviously there's the space in your suite, right? The service factor, the high-end food and drink. That's when it comes to first class flights and staying at a nice resort, nice hotel, that's where most of the luxury products compete on, right? Like how they differentiate against each other, how they set themselves apart. But at a certain level, when you're looking for luxury travel, you're also looking for a personalized experience, one that speaks to who you are as a traveler, your own preferences. That's why, luxury travelers, they tend to prefer working with a certain agency over time, right? So that the agency can develop an understanding of their preferences and just meet those needs without them having to say them or express them again. And so I think these days it's also a lot of what luxury travelers are looking for. It's a service principle, a product, right? An experience that anticipates their needs and meets them before they've even had a chance to express them. Or in some cases, right, the epitome of luxury is often when your need is met before you yourself have even come to realize it. So as a luxury traveler, that's really in these days. That's kind of what most luxury travelers are looking for. And again, if you're just a regular traveler and you'd like a taste of that, then that's where we really believe in the power of using points to unlock these experiences.
With all the stuff that you've kind of put together for your business, obviously since going through 2017, you must have a intricate network like across the world, like contacts and all that accumulation. Uh, have you gained any like I mean, you must have gained some unique philosophies or like principles that kind of help guide you, I guess, with supplying this to people, right? At the end of these people's trips that you plan for them, what is something that you hope that they always get out of it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big believer in there always being a next boundary that is yet to be explored, right? A next frontier that is yet to be charted. And so that's an ethos that I've always looked to carry in both my content and in the content that our team now puts out, right? It's this idea that the world is really full of limitless set of experiences. And, as a traveler, it's we're born too late to explore the new world, say, right? But we do have this opportunity to see as much of the world as we would like to, and it's often a much bigger slice of the world than most people actually think is accessible and possible to them, thanks to the power of credit card points and loyalty programs that if you maximize them the right way, right? If you have a travel budget for like 2 trips a year, normally you can take that travel budget and stretch it to 5, 10, even more trips per year for you and the family. And so the ethos that I always try to communicate is, whatever that looks like to you, and it's really important to think about, be conscious and intentional about what you'd like to do with the power of travel rewards. But whether that's more trips and seeing more of the world, or if you'd like to experience once in a lifetime things like first class flights and really treat your loved ones in that way, right? All of that is possible. And after you've wrapped up one such experience, there's always the next thing to look forward to, the next thing maybe for next year or the year after, that you can get back to and go back to the drawing board, planning stages, looking for that next experience out there in the world. That's been a big piece of the pie, and so on one hand, if you're using your points to do this, then obviously you've got what's the next place you want to go? How do I earn the points to get there next time around? If you're a luxury traveler, if you're more on the high end side, then what's the next experience, resort, destination, whatever you want that's going to give you that same high that you're looking for, right, out of traveling the world.
What's your perfect place to go?
Well, a lot of it is down to personal preference. For myself, I'm thinking probably, I mean, this is a bit of a cheat answer, but I'd say a round the world trip is my archetypal, like ideal trip because it gives you a whole range of experiences, right? There's a thing in our community that's called round the world trips. It's basically when you use points, right? There's a certain thing called a sweet spot, which is you use relatively few points and stretch the value of it so far into like getting as many flights out of it as possible, getting a trip that would otherwise cost you as much value as possible out of this this limited set of points. So it's like you're really maximizing, right? So when I was in my maximizing phase as a traveler, that's the kind of ideal trip that I would go on, which is this round the world trip, say 3 places around the world, right? One place in Europe, one place in Asia, maybe Southeast Asia as well, and then like 3 to 5 days in each place, or really however long you'd want, but that's just typically how long I'd go for. And what I really enjoyed about it was just the sheer range of experience all packaged into one trip, right? Because there were so many different, first of all, flights to take. And as somebody who really enjoys flying, that was really exciting, right? Different flights, different first class products. And then on the ground in each place, there's also, being able to spend 5 days in Europe and go to Southeast Asia, and then just the, sheer difference in culture and food, but just absorbing that in rapid succession. For myself as a maximizer, that was always a big attraction. And so it's not to say that that's right for everybody, right? Like some people might think about that and think like that just sounds exhausting. But the whole point is it's possible if you really do want that sort of exciting on-the-go travel style. And that's what we look to enable for those folks who are looking to maximize. Folks who are looking for a more slow-paced type of trip, that's totally fine as well.
Just to talk on that, do you think you like that just for, would you say the sheer contrast of the two places, or just kind of the adrenaline overall?
I think if we were to drill into the psychology of why the world trips are so enjoyable, I think personally that for a lot of us who go on these trips, it's just about the sheer fact that like it's possible to do this on our points, and it's so much fun to at some point you're just looking to squeeze out maximum value from your points because it's fun, right? Because you can, and because it's kind of crazy that you can, because this whole system of points exists in such a way that it's possible to spend 5 days in Paris, 5 days in Singapore, overnight in Hong Kong, 5 days in Japan. I mean, my bachelor party last year, some of my team actually surprised me with round the world flight bookings. And we went to Bangkok for 3 nights, followed by one night in Hong Kong, Tokyo each, and then we just came home. Like that was the bachelor party. And the fact that that's even possible using points at a fraction of the price, all in first class, by the way, right? So it was like a $100,000 bachelor party for 4 people that we booked for like about, I don't know, one to $3,000, like a very small portion. So that gives us a thrill. And then amongst that thrill, there's, obviously the more contrast you experience, the stronger that thrill is. So yeah, when it comes to the maximizer traveler mindset, which is, a subset of the overall possibilities of points, I'd say obviously the travel is exciting, right? The on-the-ground experiences, the in-flight experiences, super fun. But if I were to go a layer deeper, I think the fact that this all exists, the fact that there is a game to be played and a game to be won, and then when you win it, that's an extremely, extremely satisfying feeling.
No, that's awesome. And congrats on the bachelor party and the wedding,
Thank you,
I
thank you.
assume. Uh, so
Yes, yes, that did happen.
that did happen. 15 years ago, people were taking like super, super scheduled flights, get there like 4 hours early, like it was a whole event. Nowadays, like flying, I'm in DC and we've got like 3 airports we can go to. So it's kind of like, it's not as, planned and kind of, like more an event than it is today. But nowadays, it's quick and easy. Where do you see travel in, let's say, like 15 years? Like I mean, everyone knows like they're starting the first like commercial space flights and all that. Obviously, that's Mars talk. That's like, to be fair, it's probably like 60 years from now if we're
Well, who knows, right?
yeah,
Do
exactly.
you want my grounded in the industry take, or do you want my
You mean
more up in the air kind of take?
let's take the ground one first.
Grounded? Yeah, yeah, for sure. So 15 years from now, I mean, I only see the costs of travel continuing to decrease, right, and becoming more and more accessible and democratized. It's amazing how far we've come since the advent of commercial aviation and loyalty as well, many many years ago, and it's just great to see like the perks of traveling and being able to travel, being shared with so many people out there. I think we're going to see a lot of improvements to technology in the airline, airport, and just aviation experience space. Right now, basically, a lot of the tech powering the aviation space, everything from your ticketing to your, fare distribution system in the back end of buying a plane ticket, right? That's all like 70s and 80s technology. So the industry is due for a seismic transformation in terms of how everything's done. So I actually think 15 years from now, definitely, you know, stuff like your biometric association, like your biometric identification when you go to the airport will just be the norm, right? So you don't need to like show your passport or anything. It's just like show up, security check, and then step on the plane based on. I mean, that's already commonplace in Asia, and I'm just starting to see it roll out in many North American airports, right? Where you just look at the screen and then the boarding gate opens because they already know your face from the boarding pass. So much more of that. And then, looking to the airport experience and seeing it becoming extremely more streamlined as well, as better technology, better security comes into play. That's less human labor intensive, less time intensive. And so I do see a lot of friction that's currently in the travel experience going away over time because that's what all the players in the industry are all about. Right now, there's still a fair bit of stress when it comes to, if you're an infrequent traveler going on a trip, especially around airports and whatnot. So I see that, getting better, definitely in a much better place in 15 years. And I also see the same type of, reduction in friction taking place when it comes to information and a more unified experience when it comes to like not just your flight, but also your flight, hotel, itinerary, transportation, having all of that, be managed, be taken care of for you in sort of one place. I see a lot more solutions in the market springing up that aim to be that sort of, when it's time to travel, I go to this place and it gives me all the advice I need, like information I need, and it arranges an itinerary and it gets it all sorted in place. A lot of AI technology is going to be spearheading that as well. We already see people planning their trips with AI, right? Saying like, hey, make me a recommendation for this type of itinerary and what to do, what to eat, what to see there. So definitely it's going to be a lot more personalized, a lot less friction, and overall, let's hope, a more enjoyable experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And while you were talking about that, I was just thinking like obviously for security reasons and safety, there's not going to be like, well, we'll see, but like an Uber with airplanes. I'm just obviously no airplane's going to show up in 5 minutes and take you somewhere. But back in the day, I mean, you could go on a flight whenever you wanted. Obviously, since 9/11, you can't just book a flight and just stay there. Well, at least in the US. Obviously, I know it's different overseas.
Like on that thought, like we're already seeing a lot more solutions in the market that are like an Uber for airplanes. Like you see these charter jet services. JSX is one of them in the States, right? There's probably a handful of others. But basically they have these charter jets and they sell seats sell tickets by the seat between popular markets where that kind of service is warranted, which is it's less of a hassle going to like the big airports, going through security and whatnot. It's like a certain set of departures per day between, say, New York and Florida or LA and Las Vegas, right? And then in these common markets, and then people can just book it a lot more smoothly. So I definitely see a lot more players in the space offering different options to different segments of the market. And I mean, aviation's always been a very tough competitive space, but it's also, people need it. So there's always going to be people looking to innovate, looking to bring new solutions and make the industry stronger.
Yeah, that makes sense. With COVID and obviously a lot of people transitioning to teleworking, a lot of cities, like, businesses in cities and even hotels have seen like, sort of a squeeze on kind of like getting people in rooms. Um, have you seen anything like that or any change since COVID? Because
Yeah, well, the big factor there, really the heart of the issue, right, is the recovery of business travel hasn't quite taken place as much as, the industry would have hoped by this point. So definitely some of the remote working practices that were adopted during the pandemic have just persisted throughout now. So a lot more people are taking meetings on Zoom, finding that although there's a certain irreplaceability to certain elements of being in person, that maybe a lot more can be done over Zoom. This should be done rather than taking up the corporate travel budget, right, and going on a trip. So by and large, that's been the pattern now. Um, basically 2022, 2023 were defined by a return in leisure, but not yet in business, right? And business slowly, ever so slowly coming back, especially as just like, more business needs to be done, right? The world still needs to turn. And then people are now getting back to, okay, yeah, maybe
Now
there
it's
is
time to
still that
relax.
role for in-person, right? So it's time, everything's good. It's time to get back into making the dough, right? And so at 2024, we're now finally starting to see business travel approach pre-pandemic levels. And so I think we'll see a lot of in terms of activity wise, numbers wise, that number is getting back up there, but it's definitely a a different style of business travel compared to before the pandemic. You're going to see a lot more like hotel stays geared towards hotels or accommodations geared towards remote work setups, right? I'm seeing a lot more of like ergonomic standing desks in my hotel rooms these days, or desks that can go up and down, right? Or hotels that are geared towards longer stays, right? As there's more, workers who are digital and flexible location wise and enjoy the digital nomad style as part of their work experience, right? How they work is they go spend like 3 months here, 6 months there. So I'm seeing a lot more short, like relatively short stays, so not full year lease, but an accommodation solution that's geared towards that type of traveler where they can base themselves for 3 to 6 months, have all the things they need, cooking, working, nice place, nice environment to digital nomad in a certain place, especially in some of the world's cities and locations that are more geared towards that type of traveler. So yeah, it's a different profile of accommodations and the industry at large overall. But it was a big shakeup, so that's kind of expected that we're seeing some different patterns emerge.
Yeah, and just to speak in the positive turn, I mean, I've seen a lot of individuals, mostly single, obviously with families it might be a little bit more different, but with the ability to telework, I mean, they can go to, like if they're teleworking, they can go to Cancun, they can go to Bali, as long as there's an internet connection and maybe you put on a different background than at the tiki bar, you know what I mean? Like you can still do all of that as long as obviously you're teleworking. And I feel like that would spur travel. I mean, obviously, we wouldn't be at this level of teleworking if it wasn't for COVID. I think everyone knows that, but they won't say that because otherwise it would have slowly maybe happened, but it was really like just a shock to the system that kind of flipped everyone on their head. Because just like you said, business needed to go on, and it's not like people could do business like they did before from home. It just there was no going back, and I I think that's actually amazing, especially the travel aspect of being able to travel and telework at the same time, especially for people who wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And I mean, if people, you said this wouldn't have happened without COVID, but people aren't talking about it. But I think I mean, I'll shout it from the rooftops, right? Like it was definitely a shock that like accelerated this inevitability for sure. I think for a lot of people of my generation, right, compared to what was going to be, probably another 5, 10 years of the norm being in the office in your cubicle, right, like going 9 to 5. Now the conversation is different, right? Now the range of kind of what's acceptable, what's normal is very different. And I certainly, as founder of a remote company, definitely lean into that, right? And I certainly, as somebody who believes in what the value of travel and immersing yourself in different environments brings to you as an individual, as somebody bringing your best to work every day, right? That makes a real difference to me. I'm a huge proponent of that. So, yeah, I'm big on this movement. I'm happy that obviously it was a difficult time, but this was one of the more positive elements that came out of it.
Yeah, as we've talked about the future of the industry, and we mentioned AI. Where do you see your company in the future, especially going against obviously platforms that are planning these trips? How do you see yourself going against these types of setups in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for every founder, like every company, the wave of AI is something to pay close attention to. Goes without saying, right? If you're either ahead of the curve or you're probably not going to come out ahead because if you're not taking action now at a time when AI is pretty much already ubiquitous, then it's going to be difficult to compete going forward. So I think one of our natural advantages being in the industry, and yes, the industry will be shaking up a lot in terms of right how people seek out information, how people make their bookings, right, and how people plan their itineraries when they're on the ground. Definitely a lot of shakeups coming, but ultimately it's an industry of a fundamentally human pursuit, right? Of going to a new place and immersing yourself in a different environment and exploring the planet that you call home, which is ultimately, to me at least, one of the most natural inclinations that a human can have. We want to lean into that, right? We want to use AI for the areas where it's going to supercharge our human work, right? Our highest leverage human contributions to the work that we're doing. So to us, that's going to be like the unique ideas that I and our team come up with in service of helping people travel better, right? In service of becoming the leading platform for every global citizen to go further, better. That's our company vision, and I like to work it in as many places as possible because that's ultimately what we're all about at the end of the day. And we, as huge travelers ourselves, we've got the ideas for what travel means to us, what is the best way to embark on travel for the right type of traveler. And so, as part of, like, say, even just the content creation process, right, which is a big part of what we do, it's still going to be incumbent on us, the humans, to bring those ideas to the table and then use AI tools out there to supercharge our work in terms of the production process so that our audience and our customers get to see the get to experience those ideas to the best that they can. But ultimately, the AI can't travel for you, right? It can't travel for us in our pursuit of making travel content, our pursuit of documenting the experiences that are available to you, the traveler, out there in the world. And so there's lots of rooms to leverage AI tools and to invest in building our own and to experiment with solutions that AI can provide. But ultimately, the fundamental outcome that people are seeking when they come to Prince of Travel is something that we're blessed is a fundamental human experience.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I love how you kind of broke that down with AI taking over kind of like I mean, obviously the menial tasks, like, the stuff that would save us time, obviously, and then break down maybe some of the more finite details, like that takes a little bit of like finesse. That's something AI wouldn't really be able to handle to a luxury level.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's another example where, even in our workflows right now, in terms of customer service, we've experimented with you. If you've been paying attention, you'll have noticed that a lot of customer service teams out there are AI driven, right? AI powered, and oftentimes there's canned templates that come out of that. And although that like takes a few steps out of the workflow, it's one of those things in luxury travel, for example, where if if a luxury client sees a canned template at fonts, they're immediately going to turn away. I mean, even I personally, in terms of when I am working with my team, it's, if I can tell this is a chat GPT output, to me, it's not good enough because you haven't made it, you haven't done the essential phase of humanizing the content, which is always going to be uh, required for any human output work, even if it's empowered, even if it's helped along the way, even if the first 50-60% is helped with AI, the humanization factor, especially in an industry like ours, we're making travel content, it's got to be there. It's got to still have that human voice. And so whether that's in content or customer service, absolutely right. It's something that we're going to hold ourselves to that standard of always coming across with that authentic human touch. And I know, the caliber of our audience and our people who follow us, that's the standard that they're going to expect and that we're going to be delivering for them too.
Yeah. And just something that I had totally forgot that I think I read recently was nowadays, you know how back in the day, I don't know if it's the same for you, but they would say like Grandmaster got defeated by a computer. But actually nowadays, the best um, the best chess players actually combined AI with a person. They have these teams that they're using these AI driven models with actual people to defeat like the top like AI models, which is crazy because you're like, oh, okay, the best was probably AI, but no, it's AI matched with a real person, which is it's kind of funny. And then I just think of sort of like an android, but I mean that's the way it's going. It's like obviously we're not to that like Schwarzenegger level. We're still at that human touch driven.
I think that's the next medium term, let's say, at least, right? Everything I just said, I've prepared myself for like the next, 5 years. I'm comfortable working under those assumptions, but it's also at some point, I don't know how deep you want to get here, but it's one of those questions that you just don't know you don't know, right? And
Yeah.
none of us know. So, there's uh, it's fun to have the banter back and forth, but at some point you just gotta hold your hands up and say whatever's coming down the line, it's you just gotta be ready to adapt and adapt your approach.
Yeah. No, no, I completely agree. So, last question before the big ender. What is for the listeners, what is your biggest tip, I guess, for luxury travel?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I always like to give people a practical tip or two when it comes to pursuing your high-end business class and first class experiences, especially international flights, lie flat seats, right? You've got your luxury service, you've got your fine dining, you've got your caviar, you've got your champagne, that whole thing. That's what you see like advertised, right? In the space, what you see on Instagram. And in practice, if you come to Prince of Travel, if you dig into our content, you will find that there's more that meets the eye, right? There's more of planning, strategizing. It's actually a fair bit of work to get to the final outcome of that type of experience. So in practical terms, let's assume you've got some points and you know that points can get you to first class, and that's kind of your desired end goal. I would give some thought to which particular first class product you would like to try. And I would say that typically, this is something most people don't know about booking these types of flights. You're either going to want to book way out in advance, right? About 11 to 12 months in advance. So planning a trip for this time next year, or you want to book very, very close to departure, like within 2 weeks of departure. Those are your two sweet spots of timing to actually get an experience like that. Like Emirates first class, shower in the sky with the bar and whatnot. It boils down to the economics of airlines and loyalty and how they manage their inventory, right? So basically at the very start of the schedule, when they first release the flights for a year out, they have a few open seats that are available on points. Because the key thing to understand here is not every flight that you can book with money, with cash, is actually bookable on points, right? It's a subset, it's a limited pool. And so airlines release that first subset at the very, very start. You're often competing with other people who are looking to book as well, using their points. So you have to be, watching and on top of it and paying attention. And then that's how you can book, just lock in the trip a year in advance. That's best if you're the type of traveler who tends to plan, right? Or basically who doesn't have the flexibility to book it 2 weeks out, because that's the other easy way to do it, right? Where there's lots more availability is if you do have the flexibility to go somewhere 2 weeks, 1 week, a few days before departure, then you often have a lot wider pickings in terms of the premium flight that you want to book. Because that's when airlines, if they feel like they're not going to sell a seat for cash, they'll just release it as availability for points so that people can burn their points and the seat doesn't go out empty. So that's one of the things that when you're first starting out approaching this, you don't really realize until you've done the work of earning the points, and then it's like it's not that easy to just book the flight you want to book. So it's good to have that knowledge beforehand, and know what you're up against if this is your goal.
Ricky, that is eye-opening. Thank you. I didn't even think about that. It's just like one of those things where like it's available to me and I just never like think about the behind the scenes. You like see something whimsical, like somebody looks at an appliance and they're like, "Oh, I put food in it. It'll heat it up for me and I
Yeah.
take it out." But they don't see, like the cancer X-ray waves heating up the food and all the background high density power coming into that burrito. They don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but that is actually very interesting. I knew there was something like going that behind the scenes, but you never really like dig into it. And obviously you've digged into it, and that's the amazing part of Prince of Travel.
That's a hilarious microwave analogy, by the way. But yeah, exactly right.
Uh, okay, last question. What is something that your parents did that you'd like to pass on to a next generation? And what is something that you would do differently or new that your parents didn't do?
Yeah, there's actually one answer that really comes to mind for this one. I mean, obviously my parents, there were certain, things like say please and thank you, basic etiquette that they were always big on. But one of the things that really stood out to me as I was growing up was, we would travel, and I wouldn't say we traveled like all over the world all the time, but we had, annual family trips. Grew up in Asia, so mostly around Asia, but sometimes Europe, North America as well. And one of the things I was struck by every time we went on a trip is like my dad and sometimes my mom, mostly my dad, would always uh, bring us to like have lunch or dinner with a friend of theirs. Like no matter where we went, like no matter where we went, it seemed that my dad knew somebody that we had to catch up with them, and I'd have to just sit there and be a good kid and have the adults talk about me, ask me questions and whatnot. Well, wherever it was, we just seemed to do that. And as I grew up, it back then I was kind of annoyed by this whole thing because I just wanted to go to do the fun travel things, right? Instead of having to go have yet another dinner with a family friend. But as I grew up and started to build the career of my own, it was very much this realization that okay, like investing in having a network around the world is actually something that is very powerful down the line, right? Building that network intentionally by finding other people who are aspiring to do big things in their own walks of life and whose journeys will take them around the world. That's been something that I've been a big believer in, and especially as I'm building a travel business, a global business, something that facilitates that movement of people and ideas in itself. I've further bought into that, and I've been, one of the biggest. I talked about my maximizer phase when I would fly around the world for fun, right? Obviously documenting the experience. Nowadays, I'm more looking to travel intentionally with the purpose of building Prince of Travel, of enabling the work that I'm doing. And one of the key areas of focus that I have when I'm on the road, one of the main reasons I leave my home and get out there is to continue investing in building my global network and meeting interesting people around the world, so that in the future, right, no matter what we're all up to, where I am, where we are, in the world, if I'm traveling with my kids, that'll be something I pass on, which is let's go catch up with this person because let's see what they're up to. They're always going to be interesting things, and hey, no matter what you're up to in the future, right, maybe they can help out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And is there anything on the other side of it?
Other side of it, I mean, the flip side, right? Like, your parents are a certain way. In my case, my dad in particular he's pretty fixated on having me do what he does, which is he's a lawyer. So he's like been fixated on that for a long time, always eager for me to pursue law. And even now I've been in this business for like almost 7 years. He still every now and then pops up with a comment like, you've been doing great, but consider just dialing it down and going to law school, which is cracks me up sometimes. That's what I would try to do differently, right? I would try to convey that belief in my children's abilities to do whatever they wanted to pursue, and do that to the best of their ability, and do that to a level that is what the market needs, is what the world needs, and that they can make a living, rather than try to impose my will and saying like, hey, whatever I'm doing is like what you've got to follow in the footsteps.
No, that's good. So where can people find you?
Find us at princeoftravel.com. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and X. And you can also sign up for our newsletter at Prince of Travel. So if you head on the homepage, the first field, you'll be able to pop your email in. We hit your inbox every Sunday with all of the latest news and deals in the world of traveling on points. And we'll get you on your way to flying in first class, right, as soon as you absorb some of the things we're saying and put them into practice. And then for myself as the founder, you can find me on socials as well. It's Real Ricky on Instagram and LinkedIn and X. And then on YouTube, I've got my channel as well, Ricky Zhang. And that's where I've been posting a lot of my flight vlogs and experiences, if you'd like to check that out.
And I'll put that with the episode so people can check that out. Thank you so much for being on. This was definitely like a fresh interview. Like I was very attentive. I was like that. Thank you very much for being on. It was awesome.
Amazing to hear, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. If you like this week's episode of People More Interesting Than Me, please follow me on Apple Podcasts so you won't miss out on more episodes like these.